Well, today we got yet another proposal for a ceasefire that's going absolutely nowhere in Israel. At the same time, we've got hostages still dying. Mikey, what's going on over there, and are we ever actually going to get anywhere in Israel? Because this is disgusting. We're throwing more money at the problem, but it ain't going anywhere.
It ain't going anywhere. Today, the United Nations had another vote for ceasefire, which was actually vetoed this time by Russia and China. Worth noting, the United States has vetoed 2 or 3 in the past, so it's not the first time that a resolution's been vetoed. Algeria also voted against it, and Guyana abstained, but Algeria's vote is not considered a veto because they're not a permanent member like China and Russia are. But this ceasefire was supposed to start immediately and last for the next 6 weeks, essentially. The point is to give some people time to recover, send in humanitarian aid. That's a big part. But there were some counterpoints to this. So I want to hear your thoughts on this. So Russia's ambassador to the UN, Vasily, I can't pronounce the last name, Nebenzia, he said that the resolution was exceedingly politicized, and then he proposed an alternative instead, claiming that it was a more balanced document. So the United States says that, unlike the Russian proposal, the U.S. proposal was created by consulting all of the other nations of the UN and got consensus together. The United States criticized Russia's draft for lacking that same consensus and not reflecting the realities on the ground, claiming that Moscow's approach was further dividing the council rather than addressing the needs of Israel and Palestine.
Yeah, the New York Times had a piece in there about, or comment on this, where they talked about basically the Biden administration's proposal wants to limit Israel's opportunity to attack the city of Rafa, which is right on that border with Egypt. Pretty sensitive point for aid to come in. So looking for less potential casualties there, though, of course, Israel's countering, saying, hey, but that's where the rest of Hamas is. And so it sounds like, from what you're saying, China and Russia are opposing the U.S.-backed resolution because of a language issue. Not that they don't want a ceasefire, but because they disagree on the language, partly potentially because of this.
Yeah, in fact, to elaborate on that, so China's ambassador also supported the alternative proposal that was brought up by Russia, countered the United States one. And China criticized the U.S. proposal for not including an Israeli military evacuation order, saying this is basically, you're giving them the green light to invade Rafah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And I see that their second reason was also that China and Russia had refused to condemn Hamas, which I think is also interesting. If we're really pushing for a ceasefire, is it necessary to put that condemnation in when really what you're trying to do is get a ceasefire between two parties? And so I imagine if I have 2 children like Jack and Max fighting against each other, and I'm like, let's just agree to disagree for a moment, just so we can like chill the household down and not wake up the children. But everybody who signs it is going to say, Jack, you're an asshole. That's not really going to go anywhere. So I kind of see China and Russia here, mostly because they're a big partner of a state like Iran. And this is where you're trying to utilize a growing economy, really between Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and these powers that obviously we're not super friendly with in the United States, but they are. So why potentially piss off an ally of Iran when really, if your true goal is just to have a ceasefire, then have a ceasefire. Why point blame in a ceasefire agreement? I don't really understand why that's necessary, so that doesn't surprise me. But then that also feels like U.S. politics, once again, standing in the way of saving people's lives.
And the analogy you're using with Jack and Max, obviously Jack's a little bit older, so if the two are getting in a physical fight, like you might mention, like, Jack, you're older, like, don't hit Max with your entire force. And that's actually a point that China made. They highlighted the lack of addressing the asymmetrical use of force. They also said that they didn't talk about the root cause of the conflict or the crisis, and they emphasized the need for Palestinians to have statehood as well.
Yeah, well, mostly because if you leave a power vacuum there, how are you going to have any form of government by the Gazans? Because frankly, if you say, all right, Gazans, all Israelis leave, well, Hamas takes over. They'll sprout right back up and take over. So obviously, Israel doesn't want that. And some would argue that the people in Gaza do want that. Some would argue that they don't want that. Others would say, no, let's give the Palestinian Authority again, power again, and try to have better institutions under nobody dying and killing each other. Like, let's try to rebuild. And so that's what you got to get to. And it's just been a long time coming. I'm shocked how long this has lasted. We're at, this took place in October. We're coming up on November, December, January, February, March. We're coming up on 6th month here. Blown away how long this has been going on. And it's disgusting.
We thought it was going to be a quick one. We also thought Russia-Ukraine was going to be quick too. I think all of these have been really surprising.
I think it's like hope. You have hope that it's going to be fast and that less people will die. But hope and politics apparently don't go together.
So China obviously vetoed the proposal, and they were saying that United States has vetoed proposals in the past too, kind of threw shade at the United States, which I personally found a little ironic because they said that as they were vetoing a ceasefire agreement. But the United States had actually defended its previous vetoes. They said that it could have jeopardized ceasefire talks that were ongoing at the time. And so specifically, the United States wants the ceasefire talks to include the hostages that are held by Hamas to be released. Because obviously the invasion of Gaza, there was 253 hostages per Israel's number that were taken away. With that said, Israel says about 130 remain. They estimate 34 have died in captivity. But to elaborate a little more, so the U.S. ambassador to the UN, they commented, and they responded to Russia and China vetoing this by saying that for Russia and China, they simply did not want to vote for a resolution that was penned by the United States. And they also added that Russia and China would rather see us fail than to see the council succeed, even after inclusive consultations over weeks and weeks.
That would be a response from the U.S. I mean, that's clearly a U.S. response. I don't actually believe that Russia and China want to see more death in Israel and Gaza. Do they want to potentially get a benefit out of seeing the U.S. fail? Yeah, probably. But, I mean, frankly, if you've got 131 hostages over there, 34 of which have died, it's a 26% chance of death. That's sad and scary.
And the number goes up over time.
That's also true. Yeah.
So there's a little bit of hope. The last point I have is that U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, he was saying that even though this agreement isn't working out in the UN, he still thinks an agreement can be reached with mediators in Qatar, which would still include a 6-week ceasefire and return of not only 40 Israeli hostages, but hundreds of prisoners of Gaza that are currently being held, or Palestinians that are being held in Israel.
Wow. Well, knock on wood, they get this resolved soon. Thanks so much for watching this update on Israel and Gaza. And boy, let's see what happens, especially since China and Russia are part of that BRICS that everybody's worried about taking over the US dollar.